Joachim Lubbe,
Yeah.
welcome to the podcast. I've really had bad sleep last night because I was excited about this podcast. I think you're living out a life that I am very envious of.
I try, yeah.
I normally don't do this, but I normally don't like to describe people by what they do.
Sure.
But
yeah.
I want to go through just a couple of headlines about what you do, and then we'll start from the beginning. But
Yeah, cool.
if I would describe you in this podcast, and please correct me and add as I'm going.
Yeah.
So, the person who I know you to be and the things that you do, firstly, you're a lecturer.
Yeah.
I don't think people would connect all these things together when they hear this.
Yeah.
You're an extreme sport athlete and enthusiast. You're an entrepreneur. You are a leader in new business ventures. You're bringing new technology into the business front. Give me a couple more, because I think there's
I think you've pretty much covered everything.
those are the main ones.
Yeah. I play guitar and I sing when I'm
Musician, musician, and a bit of a chef. I've seen a lot
drunk.
of your
Well, I braai.
dinner for one.
Yeah. So at one stage I was braaiing 5 times a week.
Yes, you know that's what got Jan Braai started. You know
Really?
Jan Braai.
Yeah.
I think he was what was he? He was an engineer, and he had a challenge from his friends. I might be wrong with this story, but it's a good story either way.
Yeah.
He got a challenge from one of his friends to braai 365 days of the year,
Okay.
and he did that one full year, and then he just never stopped.
We did a little road trip through South Africa, and I think I tried to set a record for myself. I think I braaied 30 nights in a row.
Goodness.
But when you're on the road, I mean, that's easy. You
And
just,
is that basically like a carnivore diet then? Because
yeah, essentially.
mostly meat.
Yeah, but it was also the most convenient. So that
Yeah,
was
it's the
pretty cool.
easiest thing, and it's the nicest thing to have a beer with.
Absolutely. Yeah. Definitely.
Okay, so that's just a bit of the framing around for the listeners, so that they know who is this guy.
Yeah.
I want to go a bit back.
Sure.
What created Joachim? What was early Joachim like?
Sure. A lot of energy. Always a lot of energy. And I think it took me very long to learn how to channel that energy. So from my earliest memories, I was just outside all the time, just running around doing sports. I did sort of all the sports you could imagine. And actually one thing that my mom figured out when I was drawing or painting is when I would sit still. So she sent me to Open Window Art Academy when I was like 5 or 6. And I would sit there with the students and just draw, like whole afternoons. I remember one day they actually brought in a nude for nude study, like an actual person. And I was like 9 years old. And I was too embarrassed to draw this nude and take it home. So I drew the nude, but I covered her with cloth because I was like embarrassed. But I think it was a big mission for my mom to get me to sit still, or to be engaged in activities that are productive. So I grew up in Linwood in Pretoria. My mom's Dutch. She's a typical Dutch lady, very direct, very strict. My dad's Afrikaans. So yeah, that's sort of where I spent my early childhood.
And so if I can make an assumption, then when you got to university and so on, you leaned into the activity part, and
Yeah.
not sort of as a bad thing, but you lean into it.
Yeah, I think there was a significant event that happened. I was 15, and I had the opportunity to go on an exchange to Switzerland, and I lived in Zurich, in Switzerland. And obviously in Switzerland you have the mountains, right? And I was always just like fascinated that over the weekend there would be like no one in the city, because everyone would go to the mountains. And that's sort of where I got into more of the extreme sports, more of the individual based stuff. Because up until that time, I would have played rugby and all of those kind of things. But now I started getting into like skiing and snowboarding.
Were you there in the winter?
So it was going into winter. That's also, I had rock climbed a bit before, but that's where I really got like excited about. Just the mountain air, like there's just after it snowed, the color of the sky is like a very specific blue. It's just absolutely beautiful. So that happened when I was 15, and I was there.
How long were you there?
Just for 3 months. I tried to extend it, but yeah, I was there for 3 months. But everyone else on the program, they were on a gap year. So
you wanted to join that gap year?
Yeah, but they were 18 and 19. I was 15, so I was like the baby. But we would meet at the train station because it's Zurich, and we'd go to like wherever every afternoon.
And you were an exchange student?
Yeah.
So you had to go to school there and really experience that life?
Yeah, so I had to go to school in German. So the deal I made with Boys Eye, which I attended here, was if I pass science and math in German, they'll allow me to pass the year. So I still remember Velocity is Geschwindigkeit. So I had to do like science and math in German. But that sort of got my freedom. And I think what that did for me, I was at a very destructive age. I was causing a lot of trouble. And there I found freedom. I was essentially an adult.
Because you probably had an outlet for all of
absolutely.
that energy.
Yeah, and everything was an adventure. Every day was a big adventure. And so I came back to South Africa, and I was not interested in the rugby and where we're going to drink this weekend and any of that stuff. But I was also very frustrated because I had total freedom with the public transport in Switzerland. And that was all of a sudden sort of taken away. I remember when I was in Zurich, I was fascinated by how clean that city is and the standard of living, which is extremely high. And I associated that with banking. I think you have like 450 different banks in Zurich alone. And I was fascinated by this. So I actually came back to South Africa and I started just investigating banking. And it led me to the stock market. And I became completely obsessed. I know Dane mentioned, who was on your podcast, he mentioned, buying shares when he was pretty young. But that's where my obsession started. I remember going into the library every morning and the guys literally had the newspaper ready for me. And I would just read all the share prices. And I committed, when I came back, so I was 15, 16, till the end of matric, I committed to stock market. That was it. That was all I did. So I have a bit of an obsessive personality. So when I go down a rabbit hole, I tend to go all the way. So that was my life between 16 and then going into varsities. I started reading up about shares, and there was a investment competition, Liberty Life Investment Challenge. So I entered that, and I actually did pretty well. So I was like, okay, I'm doing something that works. I was more lucky than anything with the shares, but it gave me an outlet, at that age. So I actually didn't want to go to university. I was like, I'm doing this trading thing. It's working for me. So where everyone would have applied to university, I didn't even apply to university. My sister was like, dude, go study. I was like, okay. So I actually applied late, and I had to write an entrance exam because I had applied late. So that was sort of my early journey up until sort of varsity.
What did you go and study?
Accounting.
Okay.
And
I didn't know this.
Yeah, so interesting.
Are you also a lecturer for accounting?
Yeah, so I lecture quantitative techniques, which is essentially stats and mathematical principles. And then I lecture some finance. I don't lecture accounting. It's the one I refuse to lecture.
It's really funny to me when you speak about your obsessive compulsion to do things and really dive deep into them. I think that's spoken about negatively a lot of the time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Why is that?
I think we have this wholesome idea of we need balance, right? So, and obsession obviously goes against that. But I've sort of reconciled it by thinking that someone feels in tune, in balance in one space. So they need 3 hours of this, 2 hours of that. I don't feel imbalanced there. I feel frustrated. I have to push into an extreme to feel balanced, if that makes sense. So it's a temperament thing, in my opinion, where my temperament is I need to go in spaces with high stimulation, perhaps high danger or perceived danger, to feel balanced, to switch on, essentially. So if there's not enough pressure and obsession, I'm not engaged. So essentially, the house needs to be on fire for me to wake up and be like, okay, I'll do something. So it's that. So I think it's spoken of negatively because people don't understand differences in temperament. And I call the energy my dragon. I had to understand what it takes to work with this energy. Because if I try to be the balanced person, the standard balanced person, I become destructive. I can't do that.
Sure. I think I also had that with my brother would always say, well, I would say it myself, but I am very low energy in most settings.
Yeah.
But like when I was on a motorbike.
That's it.
Or when I was snowboarding, or when I was wakeboarding, or when I was hunting, you would see another side of me that you think, yes, like, why is this guy so excitable? And I would be, because that's what's exciting to me. And unfortunately, that's not things that you do every day, all day, except if you figure out a hack like you did.
Yeah, I think so. I have two modes. I'm either completely switched on, so I'm like cycling or rock climbing or whatever, or I'm sleeping on the couch. So I like
extremities.
Yeah, there's no like to just hang around. I would do that after I've exercised. So I'll hang around at a braai because I've cycled the day or during the day. But to be like, oh, this is going to be my day, we're just going to chill at home, that drives me nuts. I would only do that if I'm completely exhausted. So I've had to try and integrate those elements into my life because I need that stimulation. So I also don't have a fixed time because I run my own business as well. Sometimes I'd be like, I get this surge of energy. So at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, I'm like, I'm on the bike. Cheers. I'll be back at 4 or 5. The business isn't going to fall apart.
Yeah, and maybe work till 8.
Yeah, so if that's necessary. But what I've learned is I have to listen to my intuition and my body. I'm not one of those routine freak people. I'm much more an artist in the way that I have to listen to my intuition. So when I feel it, I have to go. I have to actually do that. So I've tried to, in my life, sort of integrate those elements. I think that's why I also sort of gravitated towards trading initially, and then entrepreneurship, because you're operating in a space that's very fast moving, that's very stimulating, and that always changing, high pressure, high risk. And that's sort of what locks me in. That's when I'm engaged. I don't know if it's a compliment, but my one friend said, I'm the one person he knows who has just embraced the chaos. And I think that's very much it as an entrepreneur, is operating in the chaos. And it is, for most people, extremely uncomfortable to operate in that space.
And tiring.
Yeah. But it's a space.
I assume it energizes you.
Yeah. Look, I also get exhausted after 2-3 years of building a business in that space. But luckily by now it's well defined. I know what it is. So what I mean by that is if someone's never run 30 kilometers, by kilometer 10, they're going to feel it's not supposed to hurt. It's not supposed to feel this way, etc. I understand that. This is just part of the process.
Yeah, you know what you should feel by certain
stages. Look, we're eating a shit sandwich for the next 3 hours, but I'm going to have a beer afterwards and it's going to be great.
Yeah.
But my friends know I do get hangry on races and stuff, so they have to feed me little snack bars. So I can become a bit of a diva. But I mentally I'm well prepared, and I think that's translated well from sort of the adventure stuff into entrepreneurship. And I thoroughly believe that the true entrepreneurs who operate in that space, it's a temperament thing. It's where you're supposed to be. And what I mean by that, you can't be completely risk averse and go do an MBA and then say, I'm going to go build a business for a year, etc. Because you're going to go up against guys who exist in this space and thrive in this space. And they've made decisions in their lives to voluntarily move into that space. And it's not even about money. It's they get stimulation in that space and they get freedom in that space. And that's why they exist. And those are, in my opinion, those are like the true entrepreneurs. Money is very important. I get that. But for me, I get stimulation and I get freedom.
And probably joy. You get joy from that.
Yeah, absolutely. Small victories. But
Would
we
you say-
celebrate them.
Would you say you're a happy person?
I'm very happy. I would say content if I've done my little things that I need to do. So if I've cycled or rock climbed or whatever, I have this period, 2-3 hours, where I'm just completely content. I don't have to say anything. I don't have to do anything. I can lie on the couch because I'm like, I've done my work for the day. I have that contentment. So I do think that contentment takes work. You need to earn that. That's how my mind works.
Earning contentment, yeah.
You can't just not do anything with your life and say, I'm going to be content. It's not going to happen because what happens with me is I have this feeling inside that something's not right. I'm not doing what I should be doing, So I think, so I'm content. I have moments where I'm very happy and thrilled and exhilarated, mostly in spaces like mountains, etc. But I think the contentment that I get every day post-exercise, for example, is I'm very grateful for that. I wouldn't be able to be an entrepreneur the way I am if I don't have that release every day, because you've got the cortisol that just builds up during the day, and you need to release that. And it's sad because I sometimes look at my students and I wish I could package the feeling I have, for example, when I'm climbing in Table Mountain, just the whole sensory experience. I wish I could just package it and just share it with them, because I don't think a lot of people know that feeling even exists.
Do you think it's showing people that you need a passion and finding that passion for yourself in something? It doesn't have to be your job.
Yeah, So I think a lot of people approach this question logically, which it's not. So the way I make decisions, I think all important decisions in life are intuitive decisions. So you've got to find something that resonates with you, but you've got to be really honest, and that's why you've got to make it a gut feel decision. But yes, finding things and spaces that resonate with you, and then leaning in and moving into those spaces. So, for example, I understand my temperament forces me to go into risky spaces or chaotic spaces. My sister, for example, is the complete opposite. So, like, she's not going to find joy there. She's going to find overwhelming anxiety there, right? So, but what she's done is also for her temperament, find spaces, that resonates with her. I think, I also think this idea of finding a passion, I think it's a bit naive in the sense that to flip it around to say to try and be a passionate person. So if you speak to older people, previous generations, they didn't have much, but some of them just have this energy where a guy was like, I had to work on a farm, I had to shovel shit the whole day and whatever, but he just did it with gusto, so it's that thing. So obviously you want to move into spaces that work for you, but practically that's not always possible.
Do you think it's maybe like just enthusiasm?
Yeah.
Because
so
you can get someone, like you say, who's able to create enthusiasm around anything that they have to do.
Yeah.
And it's something that
it's
I've
infectious.
thought about.
Yeah.
My brother is like that.
Yeah, absolutely.
He's really enthusiastic. It irritates me sometimes because I don't know why he's enthusiastic.
Yeah.
But I'm also envious of that. I would like to be able to turn it on.
So I think so this is one rule I try and follow, is that a lot of people your decisions are sometimes driven by fear, and they're sometimes driven by enthusiasm, or what you might call love. And making decisions through fear drains energy. There's not going to be energy there. Things are going to be flat. People are going to be flat, etc. So I think if you want to say enthusiastic or passionate people are just people who aren't operating from fear. So you recognize fear, but you don't make that the thing that dictates your decision making. So I'm aware of the fear, but my desire to make it work is greater than the fear. So it's sort of that approach. So people, when we rock climb, people say, you're not scared. Of course you're scared. So I said the other day, I've sort of lost the fear of heights, so I don't really have that anymore. I still have the fear of falling. It's a very healthy fear to have.
Yeah.
But
It's probably to keep you from falling.
Yeah, but my desire to make it up the rock face is greater than my fear of falling. So it's that. So I think the passion thing is, if people aren't driven by fear, because fear is just drains all the passion. And to not be driven by fear is so difficult, because you have to have very good perspective of life. I think you've had some experiences that shows you that. I've had similar experiences where you understand the fragility of life and how quickly it can change. And so a lot of the fears aren't even real. They're societal based. What will people say? Yeah. What if I lose my house? What if, all of those kind of things. And those aren't real fears.
Yeah, and they're mostly based on people that you don't know or don't like. So why would you care about their opinion on this?
Yeah, so that's I think where the passion thing comes from. So I think managing fear and not being fear-driven and you can feel it immediately. If I'm close to someone and they're operating from fear, they just completely drain you. I always say, kill your vibe.
Yeah. No, I know what you're talking about. I've met people like that.
Yeah. And personally, those people frustrate me so much, I just leave. I struggle to be around people.
Get out of that situation.
I just remove myself.
Okay. Tell me about, so you studied accounting.
Yeah.
After that, what happened then?
Oof. So I was like at a horse race, you have these little stalls where the horses gun out of. I was like that when I left school. So I did everything. I was obsessed with the stock market, but I needed to make some capital as well. So I remember I didn't go on matric vac. I sold houses. I was with Rawson Property. I was a real estate agent. I didn't have a car. I remember walking in my area, writing little Christmas cards and putting them in people's post boxes. That's what I did during my matric vac.
Did it work?
No. People weren't there during Christmas. It's Pretoria.
They got it in the middle of January.
Yeah. But for me, it was just about getting out there. And so I got a bit frustrated with just being an estate agent, that space, because it wasn't stimulating enough. And then I started looking at property development. So I'm still studying accounting. But on the side, I'm just doing all of these things. And I started putting together Land Assembly, which is now part of, adjacent to Menlyn Main. So there's a street there when I signed up all the owners. So that was 11 owners. And then essentially rezoned the property and sold it off to a real estate developer. But that took, because of the water use license, it took 3 years to actually realize that whole project. But I started that when I was like 19.
That is impressive.
I don't have a cent on my name. I went to all of these owners. I didn't even know it, but I essentially signed an option where I said, I'm going to give you this amount. If I can raise it, give me 6 months.
Yes.
And that's essentially what I did.
And then you sold the deal.
I essentially sold the deal. So I was doing that. I started trading commodities, like actual physical commodities.
Can I just hold you there?
Yeah.
That's what the fact that you don't have the cash or you can't borrow the money.
Yeah.
That would be the first hurdle, and someone would stop right there.
Yeah.
Sorry, I can't do this. And then, you went and you basically got contracts with everyone.
Yeah.
Can I buy your property for this amount? I'm not going to buy it, but can I buy it?
Yeah.
You agree? Yes. And you got all the neighbors and sold it to a developer. That's
So I think that's where I learned that it's not about having the capital. People always think when I start a business, I need to have the money first. No, it's about how good the deal is.
Yes.
So if the deal is good enough, and that's what I learned because I was also 19. They don't care about how old you are, what you look like, etc. If the deal is good enough, the capital will be available for that deal, and that was an important lesson. So I put that together. I was doing some commodity trading. That at that time people were trading chrome. So when you had Dan on, I chuckled because we worked together on some of those projects. But you would take a chrome dump, you would beneficiate some of the tailings, and then you would like sell the chrome.
Would you also then just use a different method of extracting out of those tailings?
Yeah, you'll use a spiral plant. It has a gravitational process, and then you get a 42 or 44% concentrate, etc. So I was doing that. Dan was in New York.
You were studying there.
Yeah, I remember sending him a Facebook message saying, okay, you're in New York. There are guys who have families with money. Sell them the dream of mining in Africa. And he did that. And so I worked initially on the initial projects. I worked with them on that. So I was doing the real estate stuff. I was doing the trading stuff. And I was studying accounting. People found me hilarious in class because I would arrive in class like wearing a suit. Not to be fancy, but I would have meetings afterwards, etc. They were doing, so I didn't have the traditional university experience because I was dead set on doing, building a business and doing all of this stuff. At this stage, I wasn't actually doing much sports. I was completely obsessed with business and building.
Did that business give you what you needed?
No. But it was almost like, I would say desperation. I wanted to make it. And I was like, this is the sacrifice. I wasn't happy.
Why didn't you think that maybe at the end of your studies, you would go into an accounting field or whatever and be able to make it as an accountant?
Have you listened to the stories I've told you with my temperament? So I actually had this discussion with my sister who also studied accounting. And she said, don't do it. Don't go article.
Did you do it as a backdoor?
So I was like, look, I want to do business. I need to understand business. So I think accounting's going to help.
I was applicable still in all fields.
Absolutely. Look, I was dead set on studying architecture. My father's an architect. I had a bit of a fallout with him. So I cut my nose to spite my face. So I just said, okay, let me do accounting. My sister's doing accounting. So I did that. But the plan was never to go article and become a CA, etc. But it's to learn the skills, of business. But I was completely obsessed with business. But if I think of my life as a whole, I wasn't healthy and I wasn't balanced in the way that I am now. So what the problem with that is it's not sustainable, right?
But you first have to do it to know that this is unsustainable.
No, I was just working ridiculous hours, trying to do everything. It worked, but it comes at a price. So
and there's no longevity there.
No. So actually what happened, I was 21 or 22. I had a bad injury, and that, in my opinion, is the result of working under pressure for 3-4 years, not taking a break, etc. So my release would be like, go out and drink. And I had a bad injury. I don't know if you know Cream Restaurant. They used to be in Brooklyn.
Yes.
And there's an escalator that comes up from the bottom. I did a handstand on the railing on top, and I fell all the way down onto the bottom of the escalator. And there's the silver pole that stops you from pushing your trolley on the escalator. I missed it by that much. So I fell on this arm.
Did you fall on the floor? Or
flat on the bottom of the escalator. So from the parking where the escalator comes up. And and then I was on the escalator, so I rode up. So my friend saw me go over and then come up again. And I just remember looking at my arm, and it was like completely twisted in the wrong direction. So I went to hospital. Because of the nerve damage to the elbow, they essentially considered amputation if they couldn't repair the nerve damage, but luckily they were able to repair it. But that was like a reset in my life where I was like, okay, the way I'm doing these things is not sustainable. if that makes sense.
100%.
I have to make certain changes because this pressure is becoming self-destructive because I'm not dealing with it properly. But it was an 8-month recovery process. I still don't have feeling in 2 of my fingers because of that. So the nerve runs, it's your funny bone. I essentially smashed my elbow. I'm very fortunate that I have full extension, so most people don't get full extension back. So I can rock climb and do everything, but I had to reteach myself how to play guitar, all of that stuff, because your fine motor skills go out the window.
Yes, 100%.
I remember doing pull-ups with a little bag of apples. That's essentially how I started. So that sort of took 8 months.
It's funny how events like that, and it's almost always, if you have an event like that changes your life, and most of the time physically, a lot of people also have it with emotional events, but it's so powerful, eh?
Yeah.
What do you think your trajectory would have looked like if that didn't happen?
I would have been dead. I promise you, I had this penchant for being really destructive. I could have been dead there. And I think, you know what I realized? Part of it was I didn't love myself. And it's going to sound so weird. But I was like, when I saw how hurt my family and my sister was from that accident, I couldn't comprehend why they upset. And then I realized, it's because they actually love me. I'd loved myself so little up to that point. I didn't think someone would see worth in me and would actually be able to love me and miss me. But then I realized, it's not just about me. I have people in my life, and they care about me. And I'm grateful for that, but I didn't realize it up until that point, that they actually cared about me. So that was a very important realization. If I didn't have that, I would have ended up dead. I can pretty much guarantee you that.
Okay, and so that happened then.
Yeah. So
and then what are there specific changes that you know now that you did make? Did you make them consciously, unconsciously?
Yeah, I think I just became more aware of when my energy goes into a space where it can potentially be destructive. So I'm very aware when I cross that line internally. And what I try to do is and that's where I try to say, channel the energy. So I'd rather jump on the bicycle or go do something. So I learned this energy is such an asset, but I have to manage it and have to manage it very strictly.
Why do you think physical exertion, doing something difficult works in that way?
I don't know. I always say I'm a bit like a border collie. I need to work and be busy. At Boys I always said a busy boy is a happy boy.
But I think that's true for most people. For some, it's just more difficult to do, and then they just don't do it.
Yeah, I also think I have to do a lot more to get that stimulation or that release. I can't do 30 minutes of exercise. It's not going to happen. I have to do 60 or 90 minutes for me to feel calm. So those are some of the things that I realized.
What did you change then? What was the next step? How did you change to becoming who you are now then?
So I took a step away from sort of all the business stuff for a bit, just to figure out, what's happening.
Did you go to do nothing, or
so I graduated. And then this was sort of graduated, did my honors. And then I had a stint for a company where I worked as a commodity trader. So I traded coal and coal derivatives. So I was in charge of running physical coal and then doing the paper trades over that, or the associated risk management. So we were exporting 60,000 tons to India, to China, etc. But after the injury, I sort of took a step back. So I was fortunate. What happened, there's two things that happened. The real estate project that I did paid out. So eventually it paid out. So I had a bit of cash. And then also when I left my company, my boss gave me quite a good package. So we had a bit of a dispute, and I always say I made a deal with the devil, but he gave me a good package. So
came out alive.
Yeah, so I was sitting around then because I was arrogant. I was telling people I'm on a sabbatical at, what was this, 23.
You could have said you were on retirement.
Yeah. So look, I made a bit of money. Now that we're older, we're like, yeah, it's not a lot. But at that time, I was like, look, I can sit on my ass for 5 years or 6 years and do nothing, and I'll be okay. You know, it was that thing. So I took a step back, and after 3 months, I was driving everyone nuts. Just doing nothing. So that's where I realized this idea of having a pina colada on the beach is not for me, man. So I was driving everyone nuts. So what I did is I took some of that cash and I was like, look, I want to, build business and all of that stuff. And I started sort of investing in little startup ideas. So through that, I ended up at the Innovation Hub, where they asked me to help some of the entrepreneurs, which was funny because I was like 23 and there were some seasoned entrepreneurs, and then they were pulling me in. But I had value in the sense that I understood the flow of capital and raising capital, and that's a big thing for entrepreneurs. So what I would start doing is get them investor ready, build their financial models for them. So my mentorship was never eat, pray, love conversation. I didn't care about that. I was like, practically, what do you need? You need capital. Okay, let's put a pitch deck together. All of that sort of stuff. And then I started investing in a whole range of projects. I became very good at losing money very quickly. We tried to build apps. 2013 apps were all the rage. You needed an app for everything. We built a little parking app that would open the parking boom with Bluetooth. So you don't need that parking ticket, right? So other guys are doing it now. We didn't have enough runway to actually go to market, but that's like one of the apps we built, etc. And after that, I was like so frustrated with apps because I'm like, you dump R1 million or 2 million rand. The market doesn't take it. You don't have anything to show. You have lines of code, right? So I was like, screw this. Like, we still make stuff, right? How do we make things, and how is that going to change? And that's sort of how I got interested in 3D printing, was through that. Now, that was like a 3-4 year period of figuring stuff out and exploring. Also, still, I wasn't really training that much. I was still obsessed with business and building business, etc. But I then, through these adventures and misadventures, I met a few guys who are my good friends now, and they were rock climbing. Our actual touch point was they were street luging. I don't know if you're familiar with that. Yeah, so they
lying
were
down on a skateboard.
And I had at school built a 2-man street luge because I'm crazy for
Like
Science Expo.
Like a bobsleigh.
Yeah, for Science Expo. And we wanted to test it to show the teachers it worked. And halfway down the hill, they would stop us because they're like, you're going to kill yourselves. We're like, this is the point. Anyways, so when I spoke to them and these guys I had met, and I found out, they street luged and they rock climb, I'm like, and they're also entrepreneurs. I'm like, these are my kinds of people. And through them, I got back into like rock climbing and like running and then cycling and then all of that stuff. But getting back to the point, I was looking at how things are made and how that might change, and that got me into like robotics, 3D printing, all of those kind of things. And I literally bought like a tiny 3D printer, gave it to my one engineer, and I was like, see what we can do with this. And so at that time, I'd also started lecturing a bit. But so I lecture with Varsity College, and they're very flexible, which I'm very grateful for. So you go and you do your 2-hour lecture, and you like,
cheers.
You like cheers. So I actually walked in there one day because they're close to my house, and I was like, do you guys need a lecturer? And funnily enough, they needed one specifically for structure of financial markets, which is a very specific niche, and they couldn't find someone. And so I started there, and then they were like, any quantitative module, they just sort of throw in my direction. So what I was essentially doing, I was lecturing, I was trying to build businesses with some of the capital I had, and I was doing some consulting as well, sort of financial modeling for guys, etc. So the 3D printing started with one little printer. I think it cost 5,000 rand. which
You
we
know,
were,
a lot of people, they thought this craze is coming, and all of them bought that same 5,000 3D printer.
yeah.
And then, okay, what do we do now? Printing random things.
That's the thing, trinkets, or what I call them kakis.
Kachel kakis.
Yeah, and
Just things with
I
no
immediately
use.
look. I understood that this is not the commercial application of the technology. You've got to look at how it's integrated into actual manufacturing.
Yeah.
And the technology wasn't that mature yet then. But what I did is I realized everyone can buy a printer, as you mentioned, have them in the garage and sort of 3D print from the garage. That's not it. I wanted to have access to market. So we actually went to Builders Warehouse and we said, we're going to put a 3D printing pod in every Builders Warehouse. So
I remember this.
yeah. So we started with Rivonia and then we did Boxburg as well. So the public could come in, they could submit their files or their designs or ask us to do a design, and then we would like 3D print.
So I remember it's like, there was like table assemblies. Then you would print all the corner brackets, you'd buy the steel, then you would have a table because you need the fittings.
Yeah, so that was the model, but then COVID hit and builders had to reprioritize that space for faster moving goods, more profitable goods, because this was a bit of a R&D project as well. So then I sort of, I repositioned where I didn't want to do just straight up consumer printing. I wanted to do sort of more business to business, integrated in manufacturing, 3D printing, and that's sort of where I pivoted from there. So that's in short how I ended up in the sort of 3D printing space.
Where do you think 3D printing is going? Where I'm very interested in, and we've spoken about this previously, about like printing a wheelchair. And I think that for me, the very interesting part about this is you can do shapes and do designs which are very difficult to mill or to mold or to do anything to get that same shape in any other way and with the same strength.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, 3D printing is part of what's known as additive manufacturing. So because of the additive nature, you can do or create geometries that you can't do with a reductive process, like milling. I think what 3D printing allows us to do is print organic shapes, which you would normally not be able to do. So 3D printing works very well for any highly customized and or complex components. So a wheelchair, there's complexity, but also a high level of customization required.
Yes.
So 3D printing works extremely well for that. So I think that's one space where the technology has really sort of shown its strength.
You also printing like casts and things for people, right?
Yeah. So we've done that. So we get the scan, we do a design from the scan, and then we 3D print that. We 3D print some chest braces.
Some medical implementation.
Exterior medical implementation. So Harry, who I work with quite a lot, they do the implant side. So they actually do titanium implants. They are ISO certified to actually do the titanium implants, etc. So I think at a base level, the technology has a lot of potential. Where it's going, what we're seeing is, especially on the design side, what the design software is now allowing you to do is to say, I have an object, I need an object to carry forces like this, and it grows the part for you from a design point of view.
With the right amount of support, and
you can say so it will use the minimum required material, its own unique geometry, all of that. So you grow the part, so it looks like a tree almost, and then you print that, and because you can't manufacture that in any other way, so that makes it interesting. So the way design is adapting. So what happened initially, people would say 3D print something, but it wasn't designed for 3D printing. It was designed for injection molding or whatever. Now we're at a level where people are specifically designing things for 3D printing. You'll see some of the innovative stuff on bicycle seats. What some of the guys are doing, print lugs for a bicycle frame. all of that stuff. But
Is that to get it cheaper, or to get it lighter, or to get it stronger?
It's mostly weight. But 3D printing has evolved a lot in the sense below 3,000 units of production, so production runs of 3,000 and less, it's cheaper to 3D print than to injection mold. So 3D printing is pretty competitive, and it'll increase in its competitiveness. So we're probably going to see in the due course, we'll see 10,000 units. So under 10,000 units, rather 3D print. Over 10,000 units, you would injection mold.
Would that be because for the injection molds, you need to create the mold, and that mold wears as well with time, so you need to replace it again?
So the problem with the mold is the cost. It's mostly manufactured in Taiwan or China, so you have lead times. And then, yes, you have the wear and tear.
Yeah, and then with the 3D printer, you basically have the material that you're printing, and you have the deck that you're printing on.
So if you want, for example, if you want 10 units of something, there's no point in spending 300,000 grand on a mold.
Yeah.
Rather just print it, So there's the strength. So I think everyone understands the strength of 3D printing, but a lot of it is getting it into industry and actually applying it in industry.
How do you think that is going to happen with the track record being quite good at this stage? Now you need to get someone to implement the new thing.
Yeah, so that is the big problem, is we see with clients, some of the automotive guys, etc. You go to them and say, we have this technology, 3D printing. You have to overcome that inertia of, we've been doing it this way for 20 years, right? Yeah. So what we normally do is we'd say, listen, let's look at your part library. We'll take 2 parts. We'll print them for you. So we take the risk. You can test them and look at them, etc. So we sell on merit. If it's cheaper, faster, better material, then why not? So we try. I mean, I sell to engineers mostly. I'm not going to bullshit them.
Yeah.
So I look at spaces where a product is fit for 3D printing. So what you normally do is you scan their design library to see what are they making, and to say, okay, these are the products we think fit well for 3D printing, and that's normally the approach we follow. And then we test it. But the sales cycle is quite long. It's about 3 months. You have to build the relationship with the guy. And then you have to take all the risk to overcome that inertia, if that makes sense.
What about the medical implementation, where I've heard, like, am I correct in saying, like, skin grafts, they print
so
organic material?
Yeah, I think the great innovation of 3D printing is not the printing. So the printing is essentially a nozzle where you push something through a nozzle, or you
just guide it.
Yeah, it's in the materials. So people are printing organs. They're printing, as you mentioned, skin graft. They're printing medicine now as well. So customized medicine. So instead of taking 30 pills, you take 1 pill that's been printed. We actually had a guy approach us to build a printer like that, where you do customized sort of medication as well. So the materials in 3D printing is where, in my opinion, a lot of the innovation lies. For example, Inconel. So Inconel is what they use to print the rocket engines, for example, for the SpaceX shuttles. Inconel is 3D printed. It's almost unique to 3D printing. It's very difficult to machine that.
So guys at the leading edge of development who are starting to incorporate these things, that is going to guide the growth.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I mean, we're seeing the rate of adoption of 3D printing is very fast. So the option for guys would be to either purchase their own 3D printer or use us. So we're the 3D printing service as sort of a contract manufacturer. We normally tell the guys it's better to use us because the technology is developing quite quickly, so you don't want to buy a printer that's redundant. And it's not completely plug and play. So you need to know how to work with these printers, and we've optimized that. So it's easier to just come to us, send us the part, and we'll just 3D print it for you.
What do you think is I know it's very difficult to guess these types of things, but is there a future where you can print a limb, print a hand, functional hand, which, like, they have previously built these things with electronics and so on?
So so it'll not just be exclusively 3D printing.
It's a combination of things.
it'll incorporate some robotics,
Yes.
all of that stuff. But 3D printing could maybe print the skin. So it's not just a robotic hand, it actually has skin on it, stuff like that. So I absolutely believe that 3D printing will contribute to that space.
What do you think of the timeline on that type of things?
Oof, no, my guess is as good as yours. Probably 10 years, 15 years.
I think in 2030.
Yeah.
I don't know why I have that number in my head, but all the research that I'm doing about my situation and what Neuralink is doing, Elon Musk, their trials, they started this year with the first implant of a Neuralink chip in a physical human.
But was that for Alzheimer's or?
That is for Alzheimer's, epilepsy, a lot of those things.
Sure,
that is the first implementation of it. But I don't know if you know the whole plan that they have about fixing paraplegia and also quadriplegia. So what they do is they will implant a chip on whichever area of the brain you have a problem.
Yeah.
So my brain has a motor cortex.
Yeah.
It sends signals saying left leg move.
Yeah.
The only problem is the cable that sends that signal to my left foot is broken.
Okay, got it.
So then they implant another one of those chips below your injury. So it's a bridge.
Okay, that's fascinating.
Yeah, and they're going to do the same with eyesight. They say you can be born blind.
Yeah.
If you have a visual cortex,
You should
they
be
can
able
mount
to
a
see,
camera, like a GoPro, whatever,
Yeah,
on your head, send the signals to your visual cortex, and that person would be able to see.
that's amazing.
So the implementation they are going to be doing, I think they're going to be doing about 6 this year.
Yeah.
Then it jumps to about 200 next year, and it jumps exponentially. In 2030, there will be about, I think it's something like 400,000.
Wow.
Yeah, and that's fast. Because
have you signed up? Or would you sign up?
they're not allowing South Africans yet. It's only US citizens.
Okay.
Maybe I should
Yeah.
try and get a citizenship. I will be more than open.
Okay, so you're willing to take that risk,
Yes.
whatever I don't know what might be associated.
Yes. I don't think the risk, because they've done a lot of animal trials for a long duration,
Yeah.
where they see how does this thing age in organic material. Is it possible to replace this thing? Is it possible to take it out and not put anything in again? What are the effects?
Okay.
And they will have more proper studies of this with it being human trials. But I'm quite hopeful for this. They are so far ahead of the rest of the companies. Just one example, the chip that they use,
Yeah.
it uses more than 4,000 wires, so 4,000 channels. The current chips that other companies are using, they call it epidural stimulation.
Yeah.
They do the same thing. They do a cognitive implant in your head and one below your injury. They use 16 channels.
Wow. Okay.
So,
that's significant.
the jump is tremendous. And I think the other thing is they're taking a lot of the human aspect out of it. They've built a robot
Okay.
that does the implants and that does the whole operation in like 30 minutes.
Okay.
And they basically implant a smartwatch. It's like about R5 size.
Yeah.
They do a cutout of your skull. It sounds pretty bad,
That's
but
amazing.
they do a cutout of your skull, and that implant replaces that piece of the skull, and they flatten the skin again. You won't know anyone's using it.
Okay.
And I think it sounds very futuristic, very new age. People, a lot of Christian people would say, no, this is, it's the mark of the devil. But I think as we start seeing this happening and improving a lot of people's lives, quadriplegics can't move their arms, their hands. How must that guy provide for himself or his family? He can't operate a computer. So that will be the one of the first iterations where they give a quadriplegic the ability to operate a computer. I mean, then he can do trading.
Absolutely.
I mean, that opens the whole world for so many people. And I think another thing that's prohibiting that, of course, is medical equipment companies.
Yeah.
I mean, the the wheelchair industry.
Yeah, absolutely.
They don't want this.
Yeah.
But I think there's enough push from the other side. I hope so.
Yeah, I think about entrepreneurship when you're sort of on the cutting edge of innovation. I think of it going from abstract to concrete. So when you're really on the cutting edge of innovation, you're dealing in very abstract terms. It's chaotic. So I always say artists exist in that space. We need them because they operate in the chaos and they see something in that chaos. So they pull things together and create something from that. But that's just art. I think entrepreneurs are the ones that go, there's these sort of abstract spaces, there's chaos. I'm going to try and create something from that.
Get some order with this.
And then sort of run it into where it has structure and order and it's tangible and it is a product. That sort of thing. And the entrepreneur sort of has to run that gambit. I also think as an entrepreneur, you need to find the space where you're comfortable. I can't just exist in chaos. I can't be an artist. It's I love art, but it's unnerving for me to just. So I'm sort of good at going abstract initial concept, get the business up and running, and then if it's too much order, it bores me. So I know sort of the sweet spot.
When there's order, you can probably hand it off.
Yeah, that's what I try to do. So a lot of my operation at the moment, my engineer will chase me out of the office. So I have to work on the business and not in the business. So operations, we've got pretty much covered well with my little team. I have to sort of build the business. And it's that concept. But I think it's important for entrepreneurs to understand themselves, to understand the space where they're comfortable in that whole chain.
Yeah.
You get guys, I can run an operation, but I don't love it the way my engineer loves it. Or an engineer that loves optimizing things, making it that 1% more efficient. You know, yes. I find that boring. But I have value in sort of a different space.
Everyone has their role to play. The same with me and Henny.
Yeah.
He runs the business. He runs new ventures. He runs all of that administrative whole segment of the business, and I run the operation.
Yeah.
Most of it. I'm practical. I need to see how things work and why things work and make sure they work.
So we've seen a lot of demand from the aerospace defense industry as well. And together with Gary, we're actually working on a project where we want to be the biggest additive manufacturing company in Africa. So we've done some of the work, etc. I can't say too much about it, but that's the vision, is to become the biggest additive manufacturing company in Africa. And yeah, it will also include sort of increasing our footprint globally. So we'll have some presence in some other countries, etc.
Are you still helping private people with
Yeah.
odd small jobs and all of those
absolutely.
things?
So I do that. What we have a minimum print fee just to eliminate the 10 Rand or 20 Rand prints, you know. So we do have a minimum print fee. But yeah, no, we do.
What are the types of things that you would do for consumers, private consumers?
Private consumers, they've got a lot of custom things, brackets, little brackets for their garment that has to go on their bicycle. Some guy wants figurines. We do that sort of stuff. But a lot of like practical things in and around the house. You know, those are some of the things that we print. But our big client base is, for example, engineering shops. They need housings for custom telemetrics that they're building. You know, so we do all the housings for them. We did sorting trays for the beers, for the diamonds. I did conveyor belt components for a guy who has a blackberry farm up in Tsanin. You know, so it's always fascinating for me to see what the things are that we can print. So it's that double-edged sword where we can print anything, but it's also confusing where you're almost overwhelmed to say,
Yes.
okay, so what do we print?
So someone can come to you with an idea,
Yeah.
or a sketch, or can it even just be an idea? It's just in their mind.
Yeah, so it can be an idea. Well, obviously, the person will have to spend time with my engineer to now actually create something. So it's essentially product development,
Yeah.
prototyping, if they're happy with that. So we help a lot of entrepreneurs. A guy says, I have this idea of a product. We'll help them develop it, do the first prototype. And then say, if you're doing under 3,000 units a month, we'll print for you. If you do more than that, it's better to switch over to injection molding. So we get a lot of that. So I think 3D printing is very cool, because think about 10, 20 years ago, if you wanted to develop a product as an entrepreneur, what were your options? You had to, I don't know, cut it out of styrofoam or have a 3D render that shows them. But show and tell is the best way to sell your product. So I think 3D printing helps entrepreneurs with that a lot.
Yeah, and it probably never gets off the line because the input cost is too much to test out something.
Yeah, so the problem is, if you want to create a product and you go to China, they say minimum quantity order is 100,000 units.
Yeah.
Or something ridiculous.
To test out something.
Yes, and you're like, no, I'm still testing the market. So I think 3D printing plays an important role in sort of plugging that gap.
I remember you telling me, I think when you started this business, you told me about a very interesting way that you source the equipment, but you're also a display shop for their equipment.
Oh yeah, so yeah.
And just I think again, that's just a very creative way of building a company and lowering your costs, but also rendering a service for someone who's doing you a favor.
Yeah, so how it works is, so I have partners, and what we've done in the partner business is they're responsible for selling the equipment, and we're responsible for doing the 3D printing service. So that's sort of the partnership that we have. And on the selling side, because they're selling the equipment, they get demo units that stand on the floor. And these demo units need to print, right? So
and it needs to demo.
Yeah, so we get access to those printers, and we use those demo printers to print. We obviously pay for the material, and we pay a little fee for the use of the printer. But that's essentially how we set it up, because yes, 3D printers aren't cheap.
But again, that's such a resourceful way of setting the idea up that doesn't give you this massive capital injection that you need to buy all the machines. Yeah. Just being resourceful.
Yeah, I think, capital has never been an issue in my mind when I look at projects. For me, it's build the project as well as you can, and you'll figure out if there's enough market and enough opportunity. You'll figure out how to structure the capital. It's not this fear-inducing, overwhelming thing to be like, I need 10 million or whatever. There's many ways to skin a cat. But
it sounds to me like you don't worry about the capital because you also look at other options. You can get capital, but you don't need capital. We can just do it in this way.
Yeah, so I think through my experiences so when I traded, I had to really develop a fundamental understanding of the flow of capital. So there are two things that would dictate the flow of capital: is risk and return, right? And it's matching those two at a better rate than the market. If you can do that, capital will flow your way. But I call those my bad cave years. I really went deep in understanding sort of global financial markets, how capital flows. At a time, I was essentially building derivatives for trading. So when I was trading the coal, which are pretty complex financial instruments. But through that, I got a fundamental understanding that if there's a gap, so if capital is not flowing, what you do in finance, you create a financial instrument to allow for the flow of capital. That's essentially what a share is. You've got people with money and a company that needs money. You create a financial instrument to allow for the flow of capital. So whenever you have that problem, it's just about creating the right vehicle for the flow of capital. So you have a project and you have people with money. How do we match the two? You need to create an instrument or a vehicle that will allow for the flow of capital. And that's dictated by two things. It's dictated by risk and return. And you need to match those two things. So what's funny is, yes, I'm an entrepreneur, but the way I think is still like a trader. That's where I cut my teeth. I started when I was 15, and that's all I did.
Are you still doing it?
No.
Why not?
So there's a few reasons. I think part of it's the bad experience I had with my accident. Some of that.
Do you think it creates a lot of stress?
Yeah, it does. It's and the physical commodities is cutthroat. You're dealing with physical. I was running 42 trucks a day out of Zimbabwe through Baitbridge. That's tough. I had a guy, think I still have the voice note, literally sit across from me like you, telling me how he's going to like bash my head in. And he would do that. He used to break down doors in Hillbrow, so he's that kind of guy.
You believed him?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's cut. But as Dan also said, that's the rite of passage you have in mining. I am looking at trading opportunities within the additive manufacturing space. So what's happened? There's huge demand for titanium 3D printing. It's coming from the aerospace and defense industry. Think about Boeing and Airbus, the amount of weight they can save through 3D printing in titanium, right?
And would that then create a fuel saving, or what is the big benefit?
Weight is fuel, which is cost.
Yeah.
And time, which is cost as well. So the only country in the world with the end-to-end titanium value chain is, guess which country? Not South Africa. It's Russia. So the problem is the whole European Union is cut off from its titanium supply. What we're looking into, and the CSIR has looked into this, is South Africa has some of the largest titanium deposits in the world. We're looking at the local beneficiation of titanium for 3D printing. So there's the commodity once again is titanium. And then sort of selling into the global market. So essentially trading titanium.
It's probably currently a good time to cut out Russia.
Yeah.
And I assume they're not doing deals with the US.
No. So, but it's a big project. It's very complicated to create an end-to-end value chain in titanium through they call it the Kroll process. That plant in itself is $490 million. So it's not cheap. But we have potential partnerships with guys who already have a plant. So the idea is you essentially
again structuring it in a way that it doesn't need that capital.
You buy the titanium here. You get a guy to beneficiate it, say in Saudi, for example, and then you sell the end product on. But I like in trading my concepts always to go where no one else is going. So everyone's going crypto or wherever, I just go in the other direction. But to do that also, to end up in spaces where there are unique opportunities, you almost have to live a unique life. Like I would never have stumbled upon titanium if I didn't go into 3D printing. Right? And I went into 3D printing because everyone else was building apps and I went the other way. So it's you've got to really venture to find these nuggets of opportunity. And that's what I try and do. So I'm quite contrarian. It's also a default in my personality. I'm quite skeptical of a lot of things, social structures and things like class and status.
Skeptical, but not cynical.
No, when I was younger, I was a bit cynical, but now I understand that works for that person. It's just not necessarily my thing. I'm like, they can live their life that way. I just can't imagine myself living, in a certain way, for example, etc.
I want to ask you, just out of curiosity, you just mentioned crypto.
Yeah.
What do you think people are missing in crypto, good or bad? What are we not seeing?
So the first acid bubble we ever had, a recorded acid bubble, was the tulip mania in the Netherlands, where people were paying more for a tulip than the value of a house. So this story of inflated prices isn't new. So if you think about it this way, people say, how crazy is it that a cryptocurrency is worth more than a house, for example, or a car? I'm like, but this isn't new. It happened during the tulip mania. I think my personal issue is I don't see the translation of value. So I need to understand value in a very basic sense. And until I don't see that picture clearly, there's obviously some value in hyperinflationary economies, and stuff like that. But the value doesn't justify the price, in a sense. For me, I'm just not comfortable with that. I don't see that link. It's like a brick and mortar house. If someone's like, you have to pay 500 million for this house, you're like, you don't see.
And you can do a quick estimate of what does it cost to do it.
And
how can you recreate it?
And the problem with that is, it's not that the price can't go high. The problem is because other people might also say they don't see the value. It's volatile, and that's where it comes in. So the price can go very high, but because there's no thing to say, oh, these are the amounts of bricks I used for this house, it can also go very low very quickly. So its value creation is very high, but there's value destruction as well. And I've just always, and it's interesting, I've also just not been interested. For some reason, I'm very intuitive with these things. I don't decide I'm going to be interested in this thing or that thing. It just happens. And I just happen to never be interested. Sure, you can make money. And then what? Like, I don't live a transactional life. I actually prefer to do business with people that I like. It's probably a privileged position to be in. I've said no to many opportunities, but I actually want to enjoy the process of building business. I think for me, business is very much a vehicle to have adventure. So for me, the idea of doing this whole titanium thing potentially, it's exciting. I'm like, boys, we're going on an adventure,
A corporate adventure.
That's a business. I think what's attracted me to entrepreneurship as well, the stories. They are fascinating stories of what guys have done and tried and the trouble they got into and all of that. And the stories are just absolutely fascinating.
I'm currently listening to a podcast. I think the podcast name is Acquisition or something like that. And they do summaries of books. And they are busy speaking about Nike and Nike's model and what Slumdog or Shoe Dog, or, that movie.
Yes, I saw that, yeah.
And one of the stories is when the owner of Nike, he went to look for a new supplier in Japan.
Yeah.
And he went with a sample of his Nike shoe. It wasn't Nike at that time.
Yeah.
I can't remember the name, the previous name. I think it was like Adidas. It was an Adidas shoe or something. And he went to a supplier in Japan and he told them, can you recreate this and how long would it take?
Yeah.
And the guy that he went to see, he told him, can we just, I want to go, just give me over lunch, like 2 hours. I'll go speak to the engineers. I'll go speak to all the people and we'll see if we can do this. And we'll meet up again in 2 hours. And when they met up again, he built an exact replica of that shoe in 2 hours' time. And that, I thought, yes, like that is, what a way to sell a person.
Absolutely.
Sell him the dream of whatever he wants to accomplish.
So there's a quote which I like, which is, entrepreneurship is the last hideout for the mischievous individual. So much of our lives has become structured and controlled, etc. And I just don't deal well with that. Obviously, I also have a big problem with authority. That's why I always say I'm unemployable. I have to essentially work for myself. But that's for me is very true. Is the freedom that comes with that.
And expression as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's also what I like is it's very merit driven. Not completely, but very merit driven. So for example, I'm in a manufacturing business essentially. Either the thing works or it doesn't work. There's no bullshitting around that. Right? Either the product works or it doesn't work. And that's the reality that I try to stay close to. I like that reality. Where your performance, it's honest. Your performance is linked very well to your output. You can't really hide.
Yeah,
You
very
know?
measurable.
You can't free ride any of that stuff, and that's where there's almost an ability in entrepreneurship. Like, you get very horrible entrepreneurs as well, but the idea of it is almost noble to say, I'm going to create something, and through honest input I can get honest output, and if I'm wrong, the market will absolutely tell me. But when you mentioned adventures, there's one of the first trading books I read. I think I got the book from Dane. It's King of Oil, Mark Risch. So this rogue guy in the 70s with the oil crisis in Iran, who created essentially what we know as the oil futures market now. One guy. It's just, the story is like, he did a lot of illegal stuff, obviously, but it's like James Bond. And apart from the bad stuff, stories like that intrigued me and always got me excited.
Yeah, and I can see how that links up with adrenaline and adventure and
Yeah, absolutely.
doing something new.
Yeah, so that's, I mean, as part of the same thing, you'll find with the adventure races we do, etc., they're all similar personalities. They're people who find sort of stimulation in those kind of spaces, you know, and it's quite interesting to note. You've got like the Ironman guys, and then you've got the adventure racing guys, and the adventure racing guys, they like a bit more of the adventure side.
Give me an example. This is now what we're going to end on, but give me an example of the wildest adventure that you've been on. It might be the scariest, it might be the most fun, it might be the most dangerous.
Wildest adventure. Okay, so one of the toughest races, but I think a lot of guys have done it before, but I wasn't well prepared. I'd just come back from Brazil, and I was sitting in the bar, and my friend said, no, he's got an entry for this race, but he knows I can't do it, and that's obviously exactly what he should tell me. And I was like, give me the entry. So my mate and I entered. So I was Transbavians. So you probably know the Bavians Club.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's 230 Ks, single stage. So you start in Willowmore and you end in Jeffreys Bay. We had 3 weeks of practice. So I sat on the watt bike for 3 weeks.
What does that entail of
Just
mountain
cycling,
biking?
Just cycling.
Just cycling.
And in my mind, I was like, it's Willowmore to Jeffreys Bay. That's downhill.
Yeah, Bavians is also not the easiest track. I mean,
it's not.
little concrete pathways.
If you fall off that, you can't get back on.
Yeah.
So we cycled for 17 hours to finish that. But I remember there's this one climb called Mac, Mother of All Climbs. So I'm with Yaku, who's doing this with me. And I look up and I'm like, Yaku, look at how beautiful the stars are, because it's like a clear night. It's at night now. And he's like, no, dude, those are the other cyclists. And that's how high they were. That was like where we needed to cycle to. And then at the top of the hill, his headlamp blew. So we had to do a mountain pass, 30K mountain pass descent with him next to me. You know, and I would go caution left, caution right. And we held up the whole peloton and everyone was mad. So that was pretty fun. We did a mountain adventure in Kyrgyzstan, which was pretty crazy as well. I think the adventure racing is a lot of fun. So we spoke about it earlier. So it's the disciplines of like running, cycling, and rowing, but you have to find your own checkpoints on the maps. And
it sounds a bit like the Dakar on a bicycle,
yeah,
or trail running.
Yeah, and you normally have one nav in the team, so primary navigation, and then you've got a guy that does like secondary navigation. And then you start with a baby one, so you start with like a 60-kilometer one, and then you go up to 120-kilometer one, and I think the one we did was 230 kilometers, and it's non-stop. So the thing that got to me is that you don't sleep. I think I raced for 30 hours, slept 5 minutes. So
was that a power nap?
Yeah, so it was a little power nap. So that's the race. It was in Mweni in the Drakensberg. To give you an idea of how long this is, there's a 30-kilometer Mweni hike that people do into Lesotho. They normally do it in 3 days. This was 1 6-hour leg of the race. So that's... we were rowing on the Woodstock Dam for 8 hours. So watch the sun come up. So we rode from midnight to like 8 in the morning. I watched the sun come up on the dam. And it's stuff like that. We have this special meal formula that you put in a Ziploc bag, you cut open the corner, and you like drink it like a squeegee, like while you're on the run.
And you can use it as a milli bomb.
Yeah, pretty much. but what's adventure racing? It's not fast, so you're hiking a lot, you're cycling, but not very fast. So it's not like a triathlon. But the toughness is in just the sheer length of it. So the world champs, I think, happened now, and that's like, I don't know, I think 8 days, 800 kilometers. So what happens, you just realize at some point when you're doing these races, this is my reality now. I'm just, for the next 2 days, I'm just going to race. That's it. So they're very tough, and immediately afterwards you're like, I'm never doing this again. And then 2 weeks later, you start reconsidering it.
What are you thinking of while doing this?
When I was younger, I used to get very angry. So
during doing it.
So what would happen is, but it's an internal thing. So they say it's almost like I had a lot of anger, and I had this emotional lid on it, or this lid on the emotions. And when you race like that, you can't hold that lid down anymore when you're like on your limit. And so my friend would know, like, he would just walk 30 meters in front of me, and I would just walk swearing. So that's how I started racing, was just pure anger. But built up anger, not in the moment, just built up. But I don't have that anymore. So now my mate calls it...
Possibly because you've expressed it.
Yeah, probably. But my mate calls it clipperscope. So I'm just walking and just like kicking rocks. And I'm mumbling, I'm like, this is so shit. Like, what the hell are we doing? And whatever. But I think it's for me, the journey is, it's internal. So you go into your own thoughts very deep. So they say you achieve like a meditative state when you're at your physical limit.
Yeah, and just that repetitive doing the same thing. You don't have to think about it anymore.
Yeah, like when we did the trance, which is you're cycling for like 17 hours because we were really unfit. I would ask my friend, what are we doing today? And he's like, no, we're just cycling the whole day. That's all we're doing. It's easy. And so mentally, I think I do these things because I take a lot from it mentally. And then the rock climbing, I've had some of the most beautiful climbing experiences, just like in Table Mountain.
Have you had some close calls?
No, but a friend of mine, people around us have had some close calls, and there's people who have gotten really badly injured that we know about. So my friends are part of mountain rescue, so they get a lot of cases as well, but it's a lot more the public. The rock climbers are normally more diligent and careful, but there are cases of like rock climbers like getting in some serious trouble. It's a lot of times it'll be something stupid or the gear malfunctioning. Because if you're climbing in Table Mountain, you're placing your own gear, so you're relying on your ability to actually place the gear.
Now, just to explain that there's no anchoring points.
There's no anchoring points. So I can probably tell the story because it was on Instagram, but my friend was climbing a rock in the Eastern Cape called Cathedral Rock. So it sort of juts out of the ocean. So you've got to like cross a waterway and then you can start climbing. And as he was climbing, he heard like a gunshot behind him. And what had happened, the girl that was climbing behind him, she fell, and then her anchor points that she had placed started popping. And so she fell, I don't know how far. Luckily, he was there. So he abseiled down to her, and they just like immobilized her body. But they sat on that rock for 8 hours because they had to get a helicopter with a long-range fuel tank to get her off the rock. She had, I think, I forgot, but I think she broke a coccyx, and a few other things. But she's fine now, I suppose. But that's what happens. You're on a rock in the middle of nowhere. And I remember talking to him, and I was like, wasn't this so traumatic? He was like, no, like he remembers getting lifted off the rock as the sun was setting.
It was beautiful.
He was like, it was badass. So those are some of the things that happen, and it happens a lot because a lot of the climbing is also done in remote locations. So you have to be...
No roads, no access for anyone to come and help you.
we were rock climbing in Spitskoppe in Namibia, which is essentially in the middle of the desert. It's these granite mountains that jut out of the earth. And even if we wanted to, if we were in trouble, we would be in real trouble. Because of the wind and stuff, you wouldn't easily get air support there. So you've got to be really self-reliant. But I think there's a misconception about rock climbing where people think it's reckless. You do get guys who do that, they normally die pretty quickly. So what I've seen within rock climbing is the guys are extremely diligent on safety and gear and placing.
Are you double checking everything?
Double checking everything, like all the time. There's obviously mistakes that happen. I know a guy over December, he didn't do the knot on his harness properly and he fell like 15 meters. So you get that, but that's your own. So you normally have a buddy and you check each other.
But I can think when doing something for 8 hours or so, your concentration.
Yeah, so
it's
especially so with rock climbing, normally if you have a single pitch, it might be 30 meters or 40 meters. But if you climb a big wall, you have multi-pitch. So you go 30 meters, pull up the rope, go another 30 meters. So you might climb 120, 130 meters. You might be on the rock face for 6-7 hours. So that's also like climbing is not this adrenaline thing. It's an endurance thing if you're climbing at that level. So adrenaline is actually your enemy. You need to be completely relaxed. Adrenaline's there for when you slip or fall or whatever, but you can't use adrenaline for 8 hours. You need to be very relaxed and focused. But I'm grateful for the opportunities I've gotten in that space, because you can go anywhere and have an amazing time. We do some canyoning as well, or we call it kloofing. I don't know how much you know about that is. So we've done some pretty cool canyons. So the average abseil, you get like a 40 meter, 60 meter, but you do like 10, 11 abseils down. So you jump in a wetsuit and you just go down. The knot and the rigging is slightly different. But it's just that, because for me, a hike in itself is boring. So this is cool.
You need to make it a bit more dangerous.
Yeah, so you hike up to a point, and this actual canyon length, I think, was 25 kilometers. And we got told that because the ravine is so deep, we won't have air support. So if anything happens to anyone, you're crawling out on the other side. Like, you're not going to get airlifted out of here. But once again, it's... as long as you're diligent, you should be fine. So like when we ran up Table Mountain the other day and then just jumped across and abseiled down, I could see the public. They were like freaking out. What are these guys doing? But luckily, I'm probably the least competent. But I have friends who are extremely competent at this. And as long as we stick to that, I'm more than willing to do these things. You know, it's a lot of fun.
Have you heard about, you probably know David Goggins.
Yeah.
In his free time, in his months off, he does fire jumping.
Yeah.
Have you heard about this?
So the fire jumpers are badass guys. And I find that fascinating. So
and it's also as volunteers.
Yeah, so in the
they don't do it for any money.
Yeah, so in the Cape Town area, you have the volunteer firefighting guys as well. And they're badass guys. So that's something I would actually, in time, consider doing, like for 6 months or so. Go fight some fires. There's something pure about being at your physical limit. It's the same with climbing. When you're up in the mountain, it's completely quiet. You might hear the jangle of the chains, but it's such a zen place to be. And you're never serious, but you're always focused. And I think that's for me important as well in entrepreneurship. Like, I'm not serious. Like, I think serious is a function of ego, but to be focused. So you're relaxed. So I've told someone in a meeting, a more serious face isn't going to make you more successful.
Yeah.
We're focused, absolutely, but we don't have to be serious.
Yeah.
You know?
That's a cool way of putting it.
Yeah.
I think I put on a serious face.
Yeah, you're pretty intimidating.
But way too often.
Yeah. No, I think it's you get in your head. That's where the seriousness comes. It's that weight. Focus doesn't have weight to it. It doesn't have this negative weight. Where seriousness has this negative weight to it. And you don't need that. It's not productive. So, yeah. So I like having little adventures. The more I can have, the better. and then I'm trying to build a little business. That's what we're trying to do. Yeah.
That was a beautiful conversation, man. I really enjoyed it, and I learned a lot about you today.
Yeah, we met at Dane's place many years ago. I don't know if you remember.
Which one was it?
The big ass.
Yes, at the
There was a
opening party.
Yeah.
Is that where we met?
I remember you. I think you were packing or something.
I used to.
So those were wilder times.
It's South Africa, man.
Yeah. No, I just remember that was a wild party because I was like, wow, what is happening? Yeah, but yeah, but it's good to sit down and actually like get to know everyone's story.
Yeah, man. Everyone has a story if you can take the time. And this is such a nice place because if me and you went out for a coffee, we would not have this in-depth conversation.
Not.
No chance. Too many distractions.
Yeah. No, I agree. And I think people who end up in interesting places, normally there's a reason that they ended up there. So I'm always curious about those people to be like, how the hell did you end up
here?
You know. So no, this is absolutely great.
This has been great, man. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you, man.
And where can people find you? Your business, yourself, your adventures?
Yeah, so the business Termite Labs. So it's online, Facebook, Instagram.
Pretoria East, it's here, close by.
We've got a presence in Cape Town as well. And then, Joachim Lubbe. It's just like my personal thing.
Instagram, what do your friends call you? Let's just give that handle as well.
Oh, no, I'm not going to say that. No. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much, Joachim. I enjoyed it.
Thank you, man.